in on that Vladimir ban. So the thing is we felt that Vladimir would start to climb back into the meta simply because now that Urgot's been pushed out, he was kind of on the fringe of being relevant. He comes back more, but more importantly, he's kind of the counter pick in the LEC to the Yasuo. How he can deal with the Yasuo, outscale him on a side lane. I feel like with the Vladimir ban, it's almost trying to force Origen to ban or to pick the Yasuo as a priority pick because they do have so much flex potential with that. But then you have to think Splyce have something for it.
Jade's, of course, the final ban, which means the Yasuo is wide open. Still a flex pick, still powerful, despite a lot of the nerfs that came through. But the first pick, Sylas. No ultimates have come through on the enemy team, but already they have the confidence first pick it here. Ender, when you talked about Sylas last week, you said that you do not want to do this. You do not want to first pick it. But the good news for him is that Ezreal, pretty powerful for Sylas, not an ideal situation. But the Nocturne ult is incredible on this champion.
Yeah, especially if you can just pick that up and look for a roam. I think that what we've seen a lot of is the top lane Sylas, which hasn't been too inspiring. I mean, Xerxe played in the jungle last week, but I want to see if maybe Nukeduck takes it into the mid lane. Origen can sort of wait and not pick away some of these, top side of the map champions. Hold on to that, counter pick at last. Figure out where they want to put the Sylas, because right now I'm honestly just not sold.
Thresh going to come out as well as the Sivir. This is an interesting choice. Now, of course, simple analysis is, hey, Sivir's really good in the late game, but I want to know your opinions on this so far. Froskurinn, you play a lot of bot lane, Sivir versus Ezreal. What are you thinking?
I think the mentality is always to have a late game insurance policy when you're facing across from Splyce, because they do like to go to that 30-35 minute window. So anywhere in your composition, you needed to have a, quote, hyper-scaling ADC. There are other champions that fit into that. I think that was just the idea here.
And honestly, going back to this Sylas pick, I think it's really interesting because one of the best ultimates that Sylas can get is sort of this global teleport. And right now, Splyce have picked two of them themselves, right? You can put this guy into a side lane because Nocturne, you can use that to go gank somewhere. Ryze, you can use to reposition around the map. So while he's not set up to have a super solid team fight, I don't think, this does give Origen the ability to play the 1-3-1.
To match a lot of the 1-3-1 that Splyce are threatening to throw down with the Nocturne, with the Ryze, these champions to support it. The Galio going to be taken off the board, of course, with very high priority support in the LCK. Lissandra as well, despite receiving some small nerfs across these last patches, still just an incredible champion.
See, I actually would have preferred taking the Galio over the Ryze in that last rotation because I think it fits better with Splyce's combination. It gives a follow-up buddy with Nocturne when they decide to dive that backline. And because you had access to Lissandra, Ryze, and Zoe still as free blind pickable champions, I'm really curious why they prioritize the Ryze so heavily, and if Humanoid's going to have a performance that matches that priority for the champion.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be just about getting this before it gets banned in the next rotation. Now, we sort of expect Splyce to go ahead and pick up a support as their fourth pick and hold counter pick for top lane. We talk about these Conqueror champions that can use this in the top lane. Well, guess what? Conqueror means a lot of bruisers, a lot of fighters that have super explosive matchups, and if you can guarantee counter pick for yourself, it sets your team up for success.
The caveat here is that could still be a Ryze top. We're under the assumption that it's mid lane.
And interesting, as we get further into the pick and ban, we're going to see the final rotation here from Origen. Will let us know where the solo laners are going, as well as what their jungle pick is going to be. But 1-3-1 full committal seems to be the story here from the side of Splyce. We have the Ryze with the map mobility, the Tahm Kench, the Nocturne as well. But I also see very safe, very defensive bot lane in the Ezreal Tahm Kench. Splyce seemingly ready to concede that lane in the early game.
And now this makes me think it is going to be Sylas for mid. Of course, still can go into the jungle, but I wonder if the Xerxe is something that Kold has in the pocket. I think you can sort of use this champion to really go hard at the early game to combat the early pressure of Xerxe. And against a champion like the Nocturne, early game is king. If you can impact the map before he hits 6, you're going to win out.
But if Jarvan is going to be the lock-in here, now this was an incredibly high-priority champion last patch, and we were so excited to think about a lot of the new picks coming in and some of these older picks getting taken out. We kind of forgot about him, and it seems Splyce did too. Origen will get him as the final pick here, but as Norskeren hovers the Warwick and the Volibear as always, we will find the final champion. Are they willing to flex the Ryze? But no. Looks like Ryze will go into the top side of the map, and they can set up mid lane for success with the Zoe pick.
Very interesting here, because I think one of the best things about locking in the Jarvan here for Origen was to take away a potential counter matchup for the Kennen. Now Splyce is going to be looking to farm it up more on the top side of the map. Of course, Ryze does provide some hard crowd control if you want to punish the Kennen, but likely going to be a hard-winning 2v2 on the top side of the map for this Jarvan-Kennen combo.
And we had some expectations going into this. We had some concerns about the 1-3-1 from Splyce, but if you look at their composition, that has 1-3-1 written all over it. Yes, they do have great siege siege and poke potential, but their ability to eat up and split up the map with high mobility ultimates, the Abyssal Voyage, the Paranoia, the Realm Warp, the Zoe and Ezreal reach is astronomical, whereas Origen are all about the 5v5.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because when I see this Splyce composition, yes, 1-3-1 written all over it, but the Zoe pick is sort of a wrench in that, because Zoe doesn't necessarily want to be going to the side lane. I actually think they're going to perform a lot better in the 1-4 style, which is going to make this top lane matchup super, super important. If this Kennen gets an advantage over the Ryze, a lot of those options here for Splyce, I think, are going to be shrunken down as to what they can do in the mid game.
A lot of question marks here. Sylas in the mid lane. How is it going to fare? The Ryze versus Kennen matchup. And are you talking about it being crucial? And two very different compositions coming out from both these sides, despite initial indications of the 1-3-1. The 4-1 coming in for Splyce, not having that strong side laner, going for the Zoe to set up Humanoid for that comfort pick. Interesting to see what the first draft for 9-4 here in the LEC has shown us.
And if we're going to finally get a victory on Sylas, I feel like this champion just hasn't been capitalizing as much. He's got so many key ultimates that he can grab hold of. Every single one of them, save for Zoe, can be useful here. And I'm curious what Nukeduck is going to pull out on the champion.
Oh, I'm excited too, because there's so many things you can do with this pick. I think you can deny a lot of the global pressure here that Splyce is going to be having. Nukeduck is the player to pull this out in the mid lane, and I'm excited to see what he's going to bring to the table with it.
We're going to have to find out. Splyce versus Origen, 1 win separating these teams in the standings. Origen can tie it up here, 6-6 to the 7-5. Can Splyce stay at the top of the standings, or will they be brought down by this rising Origen team? That's the question. Try versus try. We'll find out.
And as we settle into this game and really take kind of a bigger perspective for Splyce and their playoff runs, I know the meme is always that they're the gatekeeper team, that they just kind of scrape into playoffs, they start from the bottom. But the fact of the matter is that their strength of schedule is really tough. Splyce have to face all of the top teams, and they don't really get another free pass. Origen might be one of the weakest teams in terms of their current form that Splyce get to face on the road to playoffs. And so this win can be important to make up for the fact that Splyce are just kind of sitting on that 2-game buffer to keep them out of harm's way. But if they keep stalling out and slumping, they could be in trouble of falling out of playoffs.
And I think it's a good time to play against this Origen team that just went 0-2 last week. Of course, it is not try versus try in this game. These guys do have some wins on the board, also some losses. Hopefully we'll get that sorted out fairly soon. It's also worth pointing out that while we are talking about sort of the strength schedule of these teams and what's been going on in the last few weeks, Ezreal got a bag of gold at level 1. He sniped out Patrik in the tri-brush, so he's going to walk in a lane with 2 health potions.
Oh my god. This is the best feeling in Ezreal, because
yeah.
you always, if you're not afraid of dying level 1, you always walk into the enemy jungle to try to fish for a few of those procs on the Kleptomancy. Getting an extra pot could be big in an otherwise losing matchup.
It's not just big, it is absolutely big, because the way that Ezreal gets priority over lane is when he has trade priority using the range of the Mystic Shot, and with the extra health pot, you can be emboldened to make a lot more of those aggressive trades early on.
Yeah, you say emboldened, I see Ezreal and Tahm Kench, I'm like, yeah, maybe not too much fighting. Although honestly, Tahm Kench...
It's just about the Mystic Shot, Ender.
Yeah, you can just poke with that, but you can sort of see how this matchup plays out. I think we've seen a lot of Sivir picked into this Ezreal, and early on with the likes of the Thresh next to you, you can get that push advantage.
We do need to talk about Thresh was tapped a little bit on this most recent patch.
Definitely.
He used to have the flexibility that he could put points in either the Flay or the Q. Now, we think that you just have to max the Q, otherwise it doesn't feel as good.
Yeah, of course, the Q cooldown went from 16 seconds at level 1 to 20, so they get a pretty nice trade down here in the bottom lane.
He's got that extra pot.
And a mana potion as well.
Nailed
The
it.
little things. We were tracking a lot of Kleptomancy procs. Of course, we've all been playing a lot of bot lane games recently, so you can maybe understand the focus as Kleptomancy sometimes single-handedly decides lane, but it doesn't look like it's going to decide this one at this point. Hard for Ezreal to land those Mystic Shots in midst of this creep wave. As we check in elsewhere on the map, though, junglers on the top side, respectively. And once again, eyes have to go up to the top lane. How is this matchup going to unfold? Because for now, remaining even.
Yeah, and I think it's definitely, in terms of pressure, going to be favored over towards Origen. If you actually look at the jungle matchup, because I think junglers really do have a heavy impact over how all of the lanes play, but specifically topside, Kold went for both Scuttle Crabs. He got some vision in the river for his top laner, and while he is now pathing down away from Alphari, it's definitely going to be the fact that if these two members go 2 versus 2 against Xerxe and Chachi, it's significantly going to be towards the side of OG.
Of course, Xerxe going to grab Krugs of his own, matching XP for now, at least, as we'll get a cleaner clear. Nukeduck getting a fight started. Kold not going to flash to extend there, but we'll force the flash out for Humanoid. As red buff ticks down, that's going to force the back. Now, no TP for the Zoe at this stage of the game. That means Humanoid is just going to be in dire straits here. Nukeduck, though, I have to assume is going to back here shortly.
It's also the aftershock, excuse me, coming out of Nukeduck. So we've seen a lot of different iterations of Sylas, even a Comet Sylas, thank you, Soaz. But this one is kind of the more traditional tanky, and usually when you do see him take in mid lane, this is usually the keystone that he does spec into, and can be double dipping on a lot of the tankier masteries to help him sit in the lane and sustain and look for these trades with his W.
Yeah, and I think it's actually super important when we actually get later into the game here, especially for Nukeduck, because his E2 forces him to go into the thick of things in these fights. And when you see mid lane Sylas, you think Rod of Ages, maybe some AP, maybe the Iceborne Gauntlet, but still a little bit squishier than you would expect to see him out of the top lane. So the Aftershock is going to be very vital for him just to actually participate in later game team fights.
And it's interesting because when we look at Nukeduck, this is a guy who we talked about, ooh, we want to get him that red side counter pick. He went for blue side. He went for the incredibly aggressive Sylas pick. Now, of course, it's a flex, so there's a little bit of comfort there. But honestly, the Nukeduck champion pool, champion ocean at this point just continues to grow. And this flexibility, I feel like, is so much of what makes him a threat in the mid lane.
It's also just what makes Origen very threatening. I had some, conversations with you backstage about Drakos, where this idea of Origen in a best of one, it's been fairly inconsistent. It feels very volatile. You don't know whether you're getting on or off the Origen hype train. But if they do make it to playoffs and they do get into those best of fives, because you have such incredible flexibility in so many different unique champions, I think Origen would be empowered by playing best of series for their ability to kind of change on the fly what they're doing and how they attack teams.
Exactly, and I think it also goes into prep as well here too, because this team just adapts to every single opponent that they face against. You give them a whole week to prepare against just one team instead of two, and I think they're going to come up with a lot of cool options with how to beat them.
And that was always supposed to be the idea. They have very strong solo laners in Nukeduck and Alphari, but really it's kind of the big brain of the Origen machine, the fact that they put so much into their infrastructure, that they have hardcore veterans like Nukeduck and Mithy leading this squad. It just hasn't been as consistent as we would have wanted.
No, and of course a lot of people, even after a rough week, still remind themselves of course, the G2 victory. That a lot of people believe to be
hold on to
peak Origen, right? That's what you're looking for when you look at an Origen game, but they haven't been able to show that every game quite yet. For now, though, in the early game, things are going okay. Very small gold difference, most likely chalked up to the Kleptomancy in the hands of Ezreal, but a small lead on the top side for Alphari. Of course, going to be good. Got to level 6 early and can maybe now start to threaten a little bit more on the top side.
Yeah, and I mean, this whole game so far, Alphari has been pushing slowly but surely up towards the top side, but it's going to be very soon that we actually see Xerxe tick over to the level 6 mark. And I mean, he's been a guy that's been hovering around Alphari so consistently. And honestly, this Kennen, when he pushes up, it is a relatively easy gank when you have the likes of the Ryze route to actually set up for an early kill.
And frankly, you have to think, if you're Xerxe, where are you attacking on this map? Because you're against a Sylas with Cleanse versus Zoe, and then you have the hyper-defensive Ezreal and Kench bot lane. It feels like the only sure kill is that Ryze hard CC with Alphari's Kennen.
Now it looks like we may see a fight, though, as Humanoid tries to lay down a bit of poke, but Origen using the bot lane priority to try to contest here, and Nukeduck going to take away the Ezreal ult.
Keep in mind, Alphari has teleport, Vizicsacsi does not. So OG are going to end up backing away, but they're walking over Fog of War. Humanoid does not know that Kold is here.
Step forward, is just going to fish there, knows exactly where it's coming with the portal jump. They're going to follow up here. Ezreal comes out, burst damage in, and that's going to be first blood. Donated over to Kold.
Absolutely beautiful there from OG. It's sort of the bait and switch, right? You walk over towards the blue buff, get the rest of Splyce to be scared of that area of the map, but OG knew they had total vision control over the river, no flash onto Humanoid, and set up for the easy kill.
And now, of course, the Catalyst in the back pocket of Nukeduck getting that assist as well. He's already been pushing out this lane quite nicely. He's going to sit even more comfortably in the tankier build for the Sylas. It's going to make it a lot more difficult for Zoe. Humanoid gets this counter pick, gets in this comfortable spot, but now he's kind of on the back foot here. Has his main dematerializer, a bucket of Dark Seals, but this lane is only going to get harder.
A bucket of Dark Seals.
2 is what you need for a bucket, I've decided.
The nice thing is that he is Zoe. He still has incredible range. Now that he's got more levels, he'll be able to kind of sit and wave clear with Sylas. He doesn't need to go toe-to-toe here. And with Nocturne and Tahm Kench, it actually does get more dangerous, however, for Origen to walk into this bot side river unless they have complete information over everything. Because you can instantly have all of this far reach and all of these champions tackle on top of you.
And to take one more look at this here, of course, Nukeduck knows exactly where Humanoid is going to go back. Humanoid just wanted to get those last 2 minions, and the rest of OG did not want to give him any room to do so. They used a flash on Kold and a flash on Mithy, but for first blood, I'm going to say Worth.
And once again, Mithy is not going back into a lane where he is incredibly pressured. And Nocturne will need to pay some attention here if they want to punish that use of the Summoner spell, and it's difficult at this stage of the game.
I also think it's worth pointing out that this entire game, ever since Kold went for that early gank around mid lane, Nukeduck has just had pressure. He's been pushing in consistently. You can see him sort of use the E1 shield to approach the wave, get the AoE on the passive, use another E2, get the AoE, and then the wave's gone. Now what I want to sort of see as the next evolution here is actually grab something like the Nocturne ult and then use that to impact maybe a bot lane or a top lane dive.
Do you want to draw everyone's attention to the mini-map? There was a ping up in the top side, a red ping. We talked about how Chachi and Xerxe want to use the hard CC, while Nocturne is pathed up towards top side, which Origen had full control of because they had wards on the bottom side, knew that he wouldn't be bottom side, take the free Infernal.
Yeah, and what the call is there too is Chachi finally stepping up pretty aggressively, trying to get some chunk into Alphari, not going to be super successful in the end, but keep an eye on Vizicsacsi. He can go for the flash route and follow up with the Paranoia, but Xerxe might honestly just want to sneak into the brush here.
And Alphari playing with a lot of respect right now, holding onto the Shuriken in case he needs to get the empowered auto, the free stun combo, of course, if Ryze wants to commit, but taking the backstep, knows that he doesn't have information where the jungler is, and I gotta be honest right now, normally we see Xerxe much more active than this. Some of it does feel like the Nocturne, but on the other hand, it just feels like OG are giving this Nocturne the right amount of respect.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's actually really weird to play this game if you are Xerxe, because Alphari, the second that you sort of path topside to try and look for gank, he's playing back. He went for Merc Treads too, so it's actually really hard to even lock him down with the multiple CCs coming through, and on top of that, you're against a Jarvan, so if there's ever a counter gank scenario, because they don't have the deep vision to spot Kold coming from a mile away, you're going to lose that fight.
Yeah, I mean, look at the two ultis paired together, right? That's ultimately, Ryze does not have an ultimate.
Circles are superior.
Circles are superior. We've talked about this. AoE, that's what it's all about. And now we have OG with a very solid early game setup. Of course, only 300 gold difference, not the end of the world whatsoever, but getting an Infernal on a team that scales so well into the late game is a pretty big deal. And now we're kind of waiting to see when these towers are going to start to break. Good news is, for OG as the scaling team, is that none of this tower plating has gone down, so it's not like Splyce are suddenly going to get a big influx of gold, and they sit pretty cozy in this early game.
Yeah, Origen are just playing a hyper-controlled, very slow-paced game, although hold on. Here comes Mithy.
Mithy.
Both supports in the mid lane.
Nukeduck could get too aggressive here, but pretty difficult to punish the Sylas at this point.
And it just felt like the game plan. I'll hold it.
Here we go. They're trying to make their way out, but Xerxe's now all in the middle of nowhere. The flash out. Tahm Kench going to try to find the save. Huge committal coming in from Splyce. Getting a lot of summonal spells here, but no kills in the end.
Yeah, and while this is all going on, Sivir is just free pushing in the bottom lane. Patrik with a 20 CS lead now, pushing down that turret, getting some plating, and forcing the teleport to come out of Vizicsacsi. So all things considered, OG are going to end up winning with only the flash as an expense.
And what I was going to say is it felt like from minute zero, the fact that Kold pathed for both Scuttle Crabs, the name of the game was just to track Xerxe. Once he was on the Nocturne, they knew that his gank pathing would be slower, but they kept pushing for, very aggressive vision, controlling both of the Scuttle Crabs, and they made sure that they always knew where he was going to be so they could play out the lane pressure appropriately.
Yeah, and I think that's actually one of the biggest strengths of Kold. You see this player, and he's not always going for a ton of early game ganks, not shutting down any lane with like overkill, 2-3 ganks. What he does do is he stops the playmaking ability of his opposition. I mean, you remember what, when they played against G2 and Jankos was going topside, Kold read that and said, you know what, I'll go bottom lane, build up an even bigger advantage. This is a smart pathing jungler that will know all of these matchups and be able to abuse those tendencies of his opposition.
And now the question is, when Splyce don't get kind of that springboard early game that they're used to getting because Xerxe has been stalled out, do they actually get to that 35-minute mark where they can make those clutch team fights?
Well, we kind of saw what happens when they don't get the early game. It looks like they tried to force on the top side. And sadly, because it doesn't work out, it feels like they burned so many of their resources. That first Nocturne ult having no effect is brutal, when really if you get 1 or 2 kills, this game can start to snowball out of control with a powerful pick like the Nocturne in the jungle.
Absolutely can. Now OG with priority in top lane. They know Tahm Kench just went back to base and Nukeduck was pushing mid as well, so they're going to start up the Herald one more time. They want to take this before the 14-minute mark so they can place it very, very quickly and maybe use that to get some turret plating.
It's a super safe call because, again, the TP discrepancy is there. Vizicsacsi doesn't have teleport, Kennen does, so they feel super comfortable going for this. Maybe a steal?
Ezreal.
Knowing that they could have all of their members stacked on top of it if needed.
And here's the thing, Kold is going to use that to get a quick base out, and Origen can use that either for the turret plating, as I mentioned, or just to try and break one of these towers down once the plating does end up falling. But they're in a really good position, right, where Kold was able to solo out the Infernal Drake earlier on. They pick up the Rift Herald before the second Dragon of the game spawns, so they can now play more towards this next objective, look for some towers, and use that to try to get a gold advantage. Because honestly, while we have been, favoring what OG been doing so far this game, it is Splyce with a 400 gold lead.
Not going to be much longer, though, unless Norskeren can save his buddy, and he will be able to for now. But forcing Kobbe out of lane means Patrik is going to have access to at least one tower plate, which will start to shift the gold back. Remember that Jarvan still has the Eye of the Herald as well, so they can try to make a double play here if OG want to fully commit.
Not just Eye of the Herald, but he's got like a full runway of control wards. That's 4 control wards in the river for Origen right there, and it means that Origen can just keep pressure in top and mid, and Kold can just walk between both and just say, is today a good Herald day? Is this a good Herald place? All of the options are there for Origen.
Is it going to be a good red buff day? So the question, of course, has the Blast Cone as well as the Flag and Drag. Looks like they will be able to go for this one. Is he going to try to follow up the red buff, not taken down? Xerxe, the prey in his sight, is Nukeduck's going to grab that one in the end. Stun not going to connect there on the Abduct. And now OG are going to back off, but they have total control of this topside jungle. Humanoid going to fish for a little bit of poke, but Lantern grab just in time to deny any follow-up.
Solid play there from Kold, but honestly, I feel like I see this play way too much, where you're one of these junglers in pro play, you see the enemy on your buff, you're like, I can outsmite them. I'm going to stick around and I'm going to make this happen. Well, Xerxe doesn't end up getting the buff, and he ended up having to burn his flash as well, so it's going to be much harder for him to step forward in the coming minutes when there were other options, right? You know, Splyce could have gone towards the bottom side of the map, tried to, you know, steal away this red buff and use the Kobbe TP to trade towers on the bottom side instead, but ultimately it ends up being just, you know, a flash burned and red buff taken for Kold.
And Alphari, of course, still with TP up and available, approaching that level 11 point, pretty big for the Kennen. Slight discrepancy in XP and in CS. That's where we were earlier seeing that kind of 500 gold advantage for Splyce, but now a lot of those advantages are starting to disappear. Xerxe, of course, with an advantage for himself, but still have really yet to see him make an impact on the map, even if he has been finding those jungle camps.
Yeah, and you know, I will say that while Splyce have been taking this very slowly, it's not like their composition, you know, falls off in the mid game. I think they have a really, really strong poke here with the Zoe Ezreal, as you've mentioned. My concern is that they need control over the river in order to actually execute on this type of composition. It's not an easy comp to pull off, right? You know, you have a lot of moving pieces, a lot of, you know, global tools, and not a super strong front line, and that's where I get a little worried when they don't have firm control over this early game, because now they're going to have to be very precise in when they move into the river, when they put down vision, and they're going to have to focus on avoiding the heavy, heavy teamfight engage that Origen are bringing to them.
It's not just precision, it's quickness. You know, you need to be the first team to rotate into an area because you have to have vision control, but here comes a dive.
Nukeduck just throwing down poke, just
Interesting
threatening.
dive.
Sweet ulti. Trying to get a little bit more here. Herald is going to be used in the mid lane. We'll have at least one charge down onto the tier 2 tower. I don't think that's the ideal use cases. There's no creep wave here to back it up, but we'll get down a little bit of damage at least, and with one tower taken down now for OG.
I mean, you might as well get that tower down to half health. It means that if Splyce ever make a mistake, that tower is going to fall pretty freely, and when you have that much control of the enemy jungle, Baron becomes that much easier. So I don't mind that Rift Herald call from Origen.
And now Humanoid does take the top lane tower as well, so Rift Herald does work out, does get a bit of damage down. The important thing to note is that top tower and bottom tower for Splyce are both incredibly low. Sivir has had so much time to free hit these towers over the course of the game that one good play going in the favor of Origen could just blow this gold lead wide open. Right now, very close. Splyce with a small gold advantage, most likely balanced out by the difference in Drakes here, but Origen kind of posed to get themselves a 2k gold lead very quickly if they can get that bot lane and top lane tower.
Yeah, they're looking for the towers. They're looking for a fight as well. That being said, Splyce sitting pretty comfortable. I think they actually used some of that time there after the reset came from Origen's side to put down some vision on the top side of the map, gain a little bit control over the river, and put Kobbe and Norskeren in mid. Because when you have Ezreal, when you have Tahm Kench, what you want to be doing is using those mystic shots to clear the wave and then threaten the ability to collapse on a side lane. While it's not ideal to have Zoe up top lane, it is the best overall situation. No flash on Xerxe.
Immediately going to go in. The follow-up is there, but no. Raptor going to block the hook. Not enough as Patrik behind him still. Going to grab the kill in the end, and Origen just finding these picks left and right.
Just a questionable call. You know, Xerxe didn't have the information to walk into his jungle like that, and I was about to give Splyce some credit. You know, Xerxe is almost level 11. He'll have 2 points in the ultimate, and now that the map gets opened up, it's more important about that paranoia. You know, maybe Origen will overreach and he'll be able to punish them, but walking blind into your jungle and dying like that, obviously not the right foot to start out.
Yeah, and I mean, it's just sort of this thing, right, where Splyce, you know, it's hard to pull off this type of composition. OG can just say, hey, we're going to EQ in with the Jarvan, drop down the ultimate, and you're in a lot of trouble as they now do access the gold in that top lane turret. Are going to try to extend this advantage just a little bit, and I think the most impressive thing for Origen is their ability to play around vision and surprise these members of Splyce.
And you know, we talked about how Sylas needs so many key ultimates as kind of like that last X factor for him to just be a WoW champion for us, but I actually think Nukeduck can just play on a side lane at this point and no one can stop him. You're going to have to bring multiple members to deny him because Humanoid is just suffering in the 1v1 matchup.
Yeah, that's the thing, though, is I do like his odds in a isolated 1v1, but when you have
Abyssal Voyage, Paranoia.
Yeah, all these tools, it becomes very, very difficult. Not to mention that Nukeduck, because he's going against the Zoe, has to be running the cleanse for the added safety against the Sleepy Bubble, so he won't have the TP, which means he has to split push on the short lane, which basically means you have to be closest to the next big objective, which is going to be the Baron buff, and that's why he's in top lane.
And now as we check in on the game state, Baron still a while off the cards. Slow controlled early game. Origen, of course, steadily now building themselves a gold advantage, the 1K lead. Kennen left on the bottom side, able to contain the Ryze for now, but slowly losing the individual 1-3-1 as the Seraphs is already starting now to come in. It looks like a Banshees will follow. So Vizicsacsi sitting pretty on that side lane. Have to see if Alphari can get a greater advantage. Has had TP the entire game. Has yet to find a use for it. And Vizicsacsi steadily building a lead.
No, that was Alphari just really respecting the fact that Splyce had moved all of their members into the bottom side. He knew that there was a possibility that they look for the gank. And again, this still feels like the Nukeduck show. Alphari's fine to step off the tower, to give it away, lose some farm there, because no one can stop Nukeduck over here isolated.
Yeah, and I think we're just seeing really nice coordination from OG, because prior to now Patrik and Mithy moving down towards the bottom side of the map, they'd actually focused all their efforts up top lane around Nukeduck and making it all about him, but also just making sure that Splyce are going to have a really hard time stepping forward inside of their own jungle even to procure vision. One of my biggest callouts when I look at team compositions that don't have a true tank frontline is that actually putting down wards becomes really, really hard. Who's going to face check? It has to be Norskeren, but if he loses his flash, it becomes very easy for OG to just pull the trigger on the engage and punish him for walking forward to place down wards.
Now it looks like OG are going to try to find their way into the jungle. That is unwarded. Vizicsacsi playing very far back, trying to play safe. We'll have vision of him, the flag and drag in, the Cataclysm to follow up, forcing the flash immediately, putting him at a disadvantage, and now they're going to take the bottom tower as well.
Really nicely done there from Origen. Again, just walking through Fog of War. They use so many control wards. There's still 4 in their inventory, and they have 4 on the map currently. They use that to put down in the bottom river, get the flash out of Chachi, and set up for this Ocean Dragon.
And the unfortunate thing is that Splyce didn't really get anything. They just lost the flash, and now that they know that they don't have vision control, it's going to be a free dragon. This is the first time that I feel like, okay, Splyce are making the right call with the time that they have. We can't contest dragon, we don't have our flash on our Ryze, but while they're on the dragon, we know that we can move into the Baron area and at least get some vision down.
And now Origen are starting to group up. They've taken down all of these outer towers. Baron, of course, the next big objective that we can start to look at, unless Nukeduck wants to remain on that sideline and pressure as he has been. But the champions on the side of Splyce are slowly starting to scale up, approaching 2-item threshold for Humanoid. Pretty comfortable going for the death cap second, as you don't really see a whole lot of MR outside of Merc Treads on the opposite side.
And this is where I sort of look at Splyce, and we look forward and it's like, okay, this is the mid game. This is where they struggle to make plays happen. So I like this move here out of Xerxe. He's walking down through the bottom lane. Norskeren can use the Abyssal Voyage, but I don't want them to commit too many members because OG can just start up the Baron if they make this call on Splyce's side.
Splyce committing a lot to the bottom side. They do have a little bit of vision control here. You can see Trinket used there to try to reclaim some of that back, but right into the control ward, so Splyce won't even take the time to take it out. And interesting to see the focus on the bottom side of the map when most teams would expect Baron to be the next big objective, but a lot of faith in Vizicsacsi on the side lane, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really like the way that Splyce is moving around the map currently. They are trying to put down protection for Chachi because he doesn't have the flash, and I understand that, but they had to make that play very quickly because now Humanoid is isolated.
Could be in trouble. Sleepy there, but Kold just taking his time as the challenging smite. Now the ultis are coming back in response. Kold's going to try to make out a safety, but Kobbe's there. Has been used. Where was the ult going to go? He's going to come in right timing, right place. That's what the Ezreal is going to come through for. Xerxe now on the back foot, but OG could look to extend this one. Nukeduck trying to find a way in. Patrik with a spell shield, not going to block anything. Nukeduck needs to be careful here. Team now on the retreat. Mithy incredibly low, but Vizicsacsi is incredibly strong. Has a ton of MR. There's the Realm Warp coming in. TP response from Alphari. Kennen is just going to threaten here. The flash, will it come out? Is he going to try to commit? Is he going to try to get anything else here? Nukeduck now going forward. Is going to miss on the stun, and Kobbe's just raining hell from the other side of the wall. Goes over with the Arcane Shift to get a bit more, but OG going to have to back off.
It felt like one of the biggest problems is that Humanoid couldn't push as far forward as Vizicsacsi would. So he had to wait until the tower was, or the creep wave was pushed into him. You see that Origen tried to capitalize that, look for the dive, but Xerxe was finally in the right place at the right time, using the Abyssal Voyage as well as the Paranoia to at least trade back there.
Yeah, and I mean, we watch this one more time. I think it's a really good setup here from the side of Origen. And after they get this kill on Humanoid, notice how Kold saves his ultimate to get the last hit here. It gets a little bit messy. There's a lot of stopwatches going down, but notice this. Xerxe comes in straight onto Nukeduck, has to use his stopwatch as well. The fight looks very ugly because Splyce have to play on a knife's edge. They don't have a traditional front line, so it has to be very, very slow, and they have to pick their targets so precisely.
What I find really interesting is also the call to hold Alphari's TP. He had it available pretty much the entire fight, and it tells me that Origen were deciding, are we going to commit to this fight? Are we just going to disengage from it and take what we got?
Well, here's the thing. There were no wards for him to teleport to until the very second when he actually went through with it. So maybe the comm's getting a little disorganized there for Nukeduck as there's a spell shields the abduct.
Engage there. Now Origen set up to get complete control over this Baron area. Sleepy Trouble Bolt does connect. Let's see if there's any follow-up damage, but Patrik will be able to walk away. Has the spell shield. And OG just going to start this one. Splyce are going to need to contest. Of course, Alphari's ultimate and Flash are up and available. He can delay them getting into the pit, but they have to play this one smart.
Again, it's so hard to walk in here and put down vision. Alphari is just on zoning 2D for the moment. He dodges away from the bubble. That is key, and Xerxe has still not arrived, but Kold and the rest of OG will not stay on the objective.
Forcing all the attention from Splyce here. Not going to be able to get a greater advantage. They have used all 5 members there, so there's no split pressure here. And Splyce taking this control of the mid lane. Can look to push a little bit deeper in. Have chunked out Alphari, and they see him now on the top side. They know that there's no teleport, but they're not going to push for anything greater. Don't want to take the risk.
Here's the interesting thing, though, from Splyce, because after they get mid lane priority, they could have actually just walked into the Baron River, cleared out 3 control wards, taken some vision for themselves, and used that to set up for the Zoe Ezreal. Instead, once again, they're putting more stock in towards Chachi, trying to let him push forward, build up an advantage with extra vision control. And honestly, he has a 700 gold bounty on his head, which is good. He's farming well, but he can never hit this tower because Alphari can just clear away the waves too easily.
But of course, it is starting to balance out the gold difference. 3 dragons on the side of OG, but Splyce are not letting them get a greater gold lead. And you can see individually, Chachi with a massive advantage, and we're going to have to see if it counts for anything more, but he has now been caught out. The whole team is here to collapse. There's almost no way for Ryze to get out of this one. Hooked up, taken down. Paranoia going to go put onto the top side. Nukeduck now next on the menu. Have to play this one smart. The cleanse now comes out. He's going to try to heal back up. Going to pan away. We don't want to see it. He dies right there in the face of 4.
But ultimately, just the side laners die. You do see Splyce now kind of cheating down towards the Baron. I think it's just to clear out the vision, because while it took so much time to kill Nukeduck, it meant that Origen could get back in position from the bottom side of the map, reset neutral position in mid, and say, if you start the Baron, we can contest you.
Yeah, I mean, this game is just getting really, really interesting right now because neither team, I feel like, is really confident in actually playing the next, 5 minutes of this game. I think Origen can just look to press the Sivir R, go for these heavy engagements onto some, relatively low mobility members on the side of Splyce, but they're going to use this chance to get one more look at Chachi getting caught, because again, OG walk over no wards on their entry towards bot lane.
And it's interesting because they set that up earlier, and the vision just wasn't there this time around. Nukeduck, of course, not really a lot of options here. Tries to cleanse out. Think maybe the healing on the W will be enough to turn this, but I don't think appreciates that there are 4 members right on top of him.
Yeah, that's a pretty big mistake there from Nukeduck. You have to respect those global abilities, especially when your team is making a play on the opposite side of the map. Of course, not going to set him behind too much, and it is OG with control.
And you have to remember that coming in, this game actually has pretty big stakes. Both these teams are fighting for playoff spots. Playoff spots more important than ever. You can see how close the top is. G2, of course, head and shoulders above everyone, but second place is just about everything when it comes to this playoffs race, and winning here can be a big deal for both these lineups. So maybe this explains why they are playing a little bit more back, less willing to pull the trigger on some of these more aggressive plays across the map.
I mean, I don't know if it's just like less willing to pull the trigger or actually just making some of the wrong plays or the wrong side of the map that you're cheating towards. That said, Origen have now grouped up. They've got kind of their big break point on the Sivir. So we talked about have a late game insurance policy for Splyce. You have the likes of the Sivir there. She's got 3 completed items. And now, money where your mouth is. This is the gamble that you win on. Do you take Splyce at 30 minutes because it's just around the corner?
Yeah, I mean, and we look at this game, right? It's deadlock even in terms of gold, but I still think that Origen's comp is way easier to execute. Their team fight is so much stronger with the Sivir, with the setup of just a Kennen and a Jarvan as well. It's going to be very easy, and they even have 3 Ocean Drakes to absorb the poke of the Zoe Ezreal duo.
And you're at this awkward point where if Origen never get their ideal 5v5, a pick like Tahm Kench just feels so useless because, yeah, you save one guy, but, like, hate to break it to you, a lot of circles, a lot of AoE on the enemy team. You can't save everybody with the Tahm Kench. And the burden of execution definitely there for Splyce. Something they've struggled with a lot of the times, but have always found their way out in these late game elements. So Splyce, I don't want to meme them and say that they're super comfortable in the late game, but they have been here a number of times.
One of the strengths that they have right now is the fact that Origen haven't been able to get aggressive vision over Splyce's red side jungle. Because that they don't have complete information, they just have that shallow raptor ward. Nukeduck actually doesn't want to commit to forcing that tower down. So what he's doing is he's just forcing the wave in, and then he went and he farmed Krugs. And until they have that perfect information, they actually can't play these side lanes how they want to.
Exactly, and they're not going to get the perfect information unless they bring the rest of their team to push mid lane, walk up into that top side jungle, and put down the vision, because right now they actually have the complete opposite approach. It's about trying to surprise Vizicsacsi and look for another miracle pick in the bottom lane, when now he is finally giving more and more respect over to OG's ability to just sort of run at him from 2.5 screens away and find the kill.
And we look at this game, it's going later and later. 4 Drakes for OG, they just continue to build in these late game win conditions. Now have the Elder Dragon as an option as well if they are able to secure that one more major objective that is a huge deal for them and not all too important for this Splyce lineup. Mithy maybe could look to fish for a hook here, has enough vision to know where Ezreal is going, but once again, playing safe on the side of Splyce, but they are just going to give up this tier 2 mid lane. Ezreal comes out, is really shielded. Redemption 2, coming in from the Zoe though, not that questionable in the end.
I'm gonna say it, you guys questioned the Rifttail. That meant that if Splyce ever made a mistake, that tower was going to be free, and it makes playing around the Baron so much easier. Now what really opened that up was the fact that Alphari got the wave far enough down bottom that it bought him a big enough buffer that he could run mid and help his team make that play. On the other side, Chachi finally pushed that tower down, 4th time's the charm. Fourth time the charm of this gank.
Oh no, they're going in one more time. The Ryze is so strong, but not strong enough. Now Tahm Kench is in the middle of everything. They need to go in. He gets in, he gets out. Nocturne ult come.
That was a put me down, pick me up, pick me up.
It's like, bad idea, abort, abort. No.
Oh god. Well, that was definitely not what they wanted here. As we now hear Tahm Kench ulti sound.
That's
Nukeduck taking the Tahm Kench ulti, bringing him home. Norskeren now going to be taken out as well. Origen, just in a blitz of ultimates, are now finally able to find a greater advantage. This will open up the Baron to them if they want to push for it. 2 members down on the side of Splyce.
Keep in mind, basically none of the ultimates on OG's side were actually burnt. It's only the Sivir that they're lacking right now, whereas Splyce, they've got 2 of their primary initiation tools gone off the board.
Now the one thing is they don't have the Paranoia, and Splyce do have 2 blue trinkets available. So while Xerxe can't use the Paranoia as a drive-by, he can flash into the pit, which is why Nukeduck is zoning.
And Nukeduck's a level 16 Sylas, so if there's anyone who can use the Paranoia right now, it is the mid laner for the side of Origen, and he can now roam back to support his team. 5k on the Baron and dropping. This is where you got to keep your eyes. Battlestar might be able to do it, but they're trying to find the follow-up. Alphari now going to get pulled off. Nukeduck in the middle of everything. Now the ulti comes in. Alphari following up, finding an opportunity. Vizicsacsi going to try to fire back. Kobbe there, but the red buff going to block a few shots. Baron already taken down. Now the ulti's coming in. OG want to follow up on this one. The spell shield going to block the hook. Nukeduck now stepping forward. On the hunt has been used. Will they fight in this tight corridor? Kold's going to go forward, trying to take down Xerxe. The GA is there. Kold has bit off more than he can chew, though, but Vizicsacsi will once again go down in the exchange as Patrik is unstoppable.
Man, Drakos, these fights are wild. OG just does not want to stop. They're finally using the tools that they were given inside of this draft. All it took was the pick onto Chachi in the bottom lane, then they turn it into Norskeren, and a flawless Baron setup nets them 2 more kills and the buff on top.
And I feel like there's been some questionable calls from both teams throughout this game, but what wasn't questionable was that Baron setup. Excellent work from Origen to zone off Xerxe there to make sure that he couldn't get into the pit, that it was never going to be contested, and they got the buy one, get one free, the Baron and the kills.
Yeah, and keep in mind, it's level 17 Nukeduck now, so we can keep stealing those ultimates all day long. They're going to use that to step up, take themselves an inhibitor, and now even though there's an Infernal Drake live on the map, they don't care. They want the structures inside of Splyce's base.
And Splyce, no doubt here, this could just be the last stand. Been such a close game for so long, but a single series of plays from OG may have just turned in their favor. Ezreal ulti's traded back and forth. Sylas will have hijack up in a few moments here. Not able to take the Nocturne ult. Could look for the Tahm Kench. None of the useful ults up and available at this stage for him. So not quite as threatening as it may have been, although the timer is steadily ticking down. Can use the TK to roam to a different lane if they want to. Sleepy Trouble Bubble won't connect, and Origen just going to continue to pressure here, going to continue to poke at this inhib, have the safety of the Thresh Lantern to make it out as Patrik will go for one more cheeky auto.
And right now you have Nukeduck and Kold escorting the minions in the mid lane. They're going to wait for the next wave. That should buy them pressure here to take down this inhibitor.
Ulti coming out, Xerxe just brought back into the enemy team, and Patrik's just going to walk away. The Nocturne not able to make an impact. Splyce definitely want to save this one. Norskeren stepping forward, but the Jarvan just going to leap in right away. They're turning it around. Absolute obliteration. OG just destroying Splyce in that exchange.
And it's just too easy at this point. Origen said they're not going to contest this in the lanes. We can have all the late game insurance policy, and then they just run it down Splyce's throat.
Too good. from the OG lineup. Once again, they find that opportunity. Splyce plays such a slow game, and eventually it turns against him. Vizicsacsi, all the gold getting funneled into this Ryze, but he is the one that gets caught out, and he is the one that sets up this play for Origen to be successful in the end. Banshee's Veil now burned, threatening off to the side. Nukeduck stepping forward pretty fearlessly. Can use the cleanse to now try follow up on Humanoid, but the tower is set to fall down. Kobbe wants to throw out a damage, but just doesn't have enough. Now Patrik going godlike. The Sivir's just cleaning up fights in the exchange. Kold not going to drop. Inhibitor in their sights. It's a slow walk down, but this is going to be OG's game. They tie Splyce in the standings.
You know, they took it slow, Drakos. Origen had so many tools, and finally, once they were able to execute on it, they pressed their buttons, they went ham. And it all came from a stellar control over the map. It was very methodical coming through from Origen. And for a team coming off an 0-2 week, this is a very strong step in the right direction.
And on the other side, Splyce just look all out of sorts when they don't get that early game advantage that Xerxe has been able to pick up for them pretty much consistently every single time. We know that they stall in the mid game, but normally they have that clutch factor in the late game to pull it through. But this time around, they didn't have that early game gold buffer to help them get over that line.
I'm also just a little confused as to what Splyce wanted to do with the draft. Like, we understood, we talk about it, but it feels like, yes, you have a clear game plan, but it doesn't feel like a team plan or a game plan that goes hand in hand with what your team wants to do. It's not a pre-6 active jungler. It is not an aggressive playmaker for a guy like Norskeren, and it does leave me a little wondering.
I mean, when you do execute on a composition like that, it's just beautiful League of Legends to watch. It is much harder than what Origen assembled here. So, you know, maybe have another run out of that. If this is a best of 3, you probably have a different looking draft. That said, when you don't use Abyssal Voyage offensively, when you don't use the Paranoia offensively, everything is reactively, obviously you're going to have a bad time with Splyce's draft.
And now for Splyce, a team that's starting to fall down in the standings, risking falling out of playoff contention as well. You can't have these sort of experimental drafts where you're not fully sure if you can actually execute on them. They need to come in with a strategy that is going to work for them. Otherwise, teams like Origen are going to be trying to bump them out.
And the pressure only continues to go up for Splyce. They have G2 coming up next. SK a surprise contender in the split. A similar story for Misfits, who have been rising as well. Fnatic, who have been rising as well. So the road does not get easier here for Splyce. But on the side of Origen, an excellent start in their playoffs run. Of course, not playoffs run, rather playoffs race, getting themselves going in this week. And Vitality, of course, going to be in a tough spot to hold on to sole possession of second place. I feel like it's going to be a neck-and-neck race by the end of this week.
And I do have some questions, though. You know, Origen, some of their macro play has kind of come under fire recently. I think it wasn't the cleanest. In the end, they made good decisions. I thought the Baron setup was really well done. They recognized that, you know, when Patrik was ready, when Nukeduck was in position, how to fit together as a 5-man unit. But they kept committing to helping Alphari on that side lane instead of just pulling the trigger on the TP. So I still feel like there's some kinks to work out for Origen before they're back in, you know, G2 Origen form.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those interesting things, right, where they kept getting the kill, so technically it worked.
It kind of rewards
it. But it made the game really slow, right? Exactly. So I am looking forward to see how this team evolves as we continue that playoff race.
It is going to be an interesting question. And to see, of course, Sylas getting a win. Very important. Ender,
Missed it.
So
It was
sorry.
fun. I was very excited.
First pick on blue side, too, Ender. Your absolute worst nightmare, but it does work out. And it's good for Nukeduck because you look at the best Abyssal Voyage and the best use of Paranoia, and they were both from the Sylas. You could say that game.
I'm telling you, the global teleports are sick for Sylas. You can make so many plays.
It's a good setup, right? And a lot of those ults weren't amazing. The Ezreal ult was okay, but getting the Tahm Kench and having that Nocturne tool was really what set them up for success in those final picks. And it does look like this pick could be very powerful. We could see more of it, but this is definitely not the game where you say that because it was so slow. We did not see a lot of action from either side.
Again, I felt like it wasn't so much about how Sylas was fitting into the 5v5, but more of how he fit out into that side lane and the fact that it was Zoe versus Sylas, and you couldn't do anything. Zoe was like, I just have to wait until this minion wave comes into me. I can't extend forward. I don't have the same, you know, tankiness or mobility that someone like Sylas will be to walk away from having such an extended reach on that map.
And that was sort of our thought coming into 9.4. Is 1-3-1 going to be stronger? Our first game says yes, to an extent. Now the question is, how much will that continue to sort of adapt and evolve as we get through the rest of the day? Because I don't think we have a set, you know, decision on what side is better, what style of play is better, and we might get a clearer answer as we move forward.
That's a good question. I do like the Ryze coming in, though. This is a pick that we saw drop off in priority a little bit, but seems to be taking his place once again back in the meta. Came in, came out, but the Aftershock Ryze always looks good to me. Of course, who had the best performance? That is going to be the question we want to ask you, dear audience. Kold, Nukeduck, Patrik. Let us know. Head over to @eSports and vote for your key player of the game.
I'm going to say Nukeduck.
I'm going to say Nukeduck.
I think the deciding factor was zoning off the Baron. He also had that sick flank to kill Tahm Kench once Norskeren had expended his flash. I say Nukeduck.
Stole an ult from Ezreal to kill their mid laner with it. Always feels a little BM. Love that champion. But for more on that game, let's head over to Quickshot and friends at the analyst desk.
Thank you very much. Yeah, they're not my friends. Gentlemen, analysts, picks and bans. First game on patch 9.4. Something that Amazing you were talking about coming into the day was that Sylas and Xerxe you felt were going to be very high priority.
Yep.
Didn't see the Xerxe, but we saw Sylas first pick. What else about the rest of the draft did you like or dislike?
I mean, I liked what Origen was going for in the end because I think their game plan was kind of to outscale Splyce in teamfight scenarios. So basically, like, counter them with their own poison to a certain extent and just play a 4-1 comp that would work out for them in the long run. Whereas on the other side, Splyce tried to do something I've seen before and has never worked for them. It's trying to bring in 1-3-1 elements into a 1-4 team. You can't change the nature of your team unless you're really preparing them for the long run. And so far, they have looked unprepared in any kind of 1-3-1 scenario. You cannot run 2 mid-lane champions in Ezreal and Zoe, and then suddenly expect the Ryze to be able to go side lane with Nocturne and Tahm.
I also agree with what the casters were saying as well with regards to playing towards your strengths. I think that one of the things that Splyce have often showcased is that they can team fight and they have the talented players to do it. And the way in which you draft, as Amazing was talking about, you have all these other elements that have not found them success, especially over the last few weeks. You've picked a jungler that doesn't have any influence until level 6, and then realistically you have no lanes that you can play around. You also pick yourself a mid laner that struggles in the 1v1 matchup and then offers nothing to the team. And I just feel that today Splyce's draft didn't really achieve very much, and as we saw in the game, the fact that the score was 10-2 just showcased how much of an influence actually.
I mean, you talked about that mid lane, and it was actually the Zoe that got picked off of First Blood. You know, really good sync-up play and commitment coming from the Origen side. But it was a game that was very drawn out, was very slow until 30 minutes. I actually want to show you the gold graph and some of the stats in the post-game breakdown. And it was just something that Origen just kept taking small steps, small steps. Look at that gold difference. You know, 600, 700 difference until about 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden Origen just find the pick, find the Baron, and win the game, Vedius.
And what I really loved is, again, Amazing was talking about it in the draft, what I loved from Origen is the fact that they blind pick the Sylas and then they early pick the Kennen, or they pick the Kennen in response to the Ryze and they say, pick which one you want. You either lose again, you either have a winning match on one side, but you're going to lose somewhere else.
Yeah.
And Splyce had no answers. So even though Vizicsacsi was very impactful in the side lane, they had a struggling mids, and it's kind of, even though it's not evident in the damage, you can just very clearly see it in the gold.
Listen, I want to push us along to some of the replays as well, because the first replay we're going to bring up is the Battle for Norway, where Nukeduck takes down Norskeren. And the reason it was very funny to me is it was actually Norskeren and Kobbe that tried to initiate with the Tahm Kench ultimate. They end up getting that stolen away. You can actually see on your screen right now as Nukeduck is now chasing them.
So what I thought was hilarious about this play is just the idea of Sylas's mouth getting really big and then asking Alphari to jump into a human being's mouth to then set up a flank, which turns into a kill, which is great because it gets them vision control. But just this idea that Sylas would just have a giant mouth and say, Alphari, get in my mouth.
What?
I actually don't know.
That idea is just so funny to me. That's what's so cool about Sylas.
So
All the ultis he can steal.
This man is paid to analyze this game, all right? Spends hours and hours watching footage and learning professional League of Legends. And his analysis is, wow, Sylas opened his mouth and said, Alphari, jump in. Let me turn to a professional here, and Amazing. What do you take on that pick that leads us to our second replay and then the Baron?
Man, honestly, I just love Sylas. Whenever you see someone else ultimate and ends up killing them with it, it's actually entertaining. You know, it's really like insulting someone to his face. So I really like the setup here for OG. I was kind of questioning it in-game because you have two members that cannot actually take the Nashor, but the zone control that they exerted here basically forced Xerxe completely out. He couldn't even get into flash range, so they could secure the Nashor without any kind of contest whatsoever.
And this is the kind of Sylas that I love to see. Initially, I saw it over in the LCK, I believe played by Chovy, Griffin's mid laner, where you basically just go more towards the tanky aspect, and you just become a brawler, obnoxious champion that gets in people's faces. You rely on the sustain, you have good wave clear, and you just soak up damage. And in this instance, we saw the Jarvan go full damage. Whether that was required is debatable, but ultimately what we saw was the effect of this Sylas in these kind of fights or skirmishes. We just can't kill him. And he's just super obnoxious and can zone away an entire team.
And I think it's not going to be a surprise to anybody. Nukeduck gets the key player of the game. He picked up 51% of the votes on that Sylas play. And before we go to ad break, Vedius, I'm going to come back to you one last time. This was a much slower tempo game than even I was expecting. I knew it was going to be a little slower. One of the big things that you said coming into the pre-match was the man behind you, Mithy, needed to have a standout performance, Mithy and Patrik. Was it them? Was it their holding? Or was this just Origen outclassing Splyce at 11?
So ultimately, what I think is this bot lane has to go even or ahead, and I think the fact that they prioritized the Sivir Thresh lane very early on, what I thought was interesting was there was no priority on the Lucian, and the fact that lane-dominant ADs have maybe moved away is a benefit for Origen, and the fact that you can just play Sivir, pick a strong support in the form of Thresh and just hold your own, I think is going to be very beneficial for Origen in the long run, because they can utilize their very smart players to make all the big moves in the mid-game.
I mean, the slower the game is, the longer time you have to think, and it really benefits Origen. Like when they actually can set up a game plan and have Mithy just not be like too committed to actually having to lane properly, but just rather like sitting in the bush, you know, waiting for his AD carry to push out and then like roaming around the map. It will set up so many more plays for Origen to come forth too, and we're probably going to see that trend continuing, honestly.
Interesting. Well, let's see how the rest of the games play out. Thank you very much for the analysis, gentlemen. Coming up next, Kold will be joining Drakos and Froskurinn for picks and bans as XL Esports take on SK Gaming to clash on the Rift.